is just a quick overview of the account-based selling process that we spoke about. So to break it down again, it's market segmentation, so looking at the market and then the accounts within that particular market segment that we're looking at, and then we look at the contacts and what role they play in the buying decision, and then ultimately what issues that are those contacts having. The idea behind the account-based selling, where it's a little bit different, is we look to have technology accelerate the process for us. So here's an example of a couple technology tools that we use. What I did, and I'll just turn this on here so we can see it, is I said, show me all of the facilities in the last few years that have like a compressor related to it. So here we see there's 583 facilities. One of the tools that we can look at is we can say, okay, well, let's look at the heat map and see if we can look at some market segmentation. So one market that we talked about, kind of that Rocky to Drayton Valley market. So I can now go in and run the same query and say, only show me the information that's the accounts that are in that area. The net result, and I just put it in Excel a little bit easier, is here's a list of companies that we have in that particular market. So now we can go down this, and our goal of account-based selling, yeah, it'd be nice to sell all of those, but does it meet the criteria that we're looking for from an account perspective? So one thing that we can do is we can come through and say, okay, yeah, Velvet Energy, that looks like an interesting company for us. So I can come back over here and essentially run the same query, but looking at it everywhere. So I want to look at essentially any facility that has compressor associated, and then I say the account, and we look at the account name, select, equals, paste, Velvet. And again, I'm doing all of this for you as part of the process of finding those key contacts that we're looking for. I can now go ahead and I can click this, and it's going to come in and say, okay, the last 3 years, what does that look like for us? So now we've come in and we've got our 9 records that we've talked about, and then we can break it down based on the dates. So this was kind of the most relevant date. We can look at oil batteries, gas processing plants, compressor stations. We can see kind of what the throughput is. Gas, 943 cubic meters. So this is a relatively large compressor station that we're putting in at this particular facility. And so again, so it fits into that target market, that market segmentation. We can say that, you know, we're looking in that Rocky Mountain, Edson, Drayton Valley kind of triangle here. Then the next thing that we look at when we you know, we can say, yeah, this is an account that we want to target. So the next thing we want to look at here is we want to say to ourselves, okay, let's look at the contacts related to this particular account. Again, I can use some of the mapping side of it to help me out as we go through that market segmentation, and I'll add a filter and I'll say account name, select, equals, put Velvet in there, add the filter, and let's go in and take a look at the contacts associated with it. So where are these contacts located for Velvet Energy? And as per what we've gotten from LinkedIn. So we've got a pretty large distribution of people coming out of Grand Prairie, Red Deer, Edson. So we've got the field guys, and then, but one of the things that we want to look at is what are the titles associated with those people? Who is it that we want to target with regards to our focus? So it might be something like, hey, let's look at construction supervisors. There's a battery operator, maybe the chief engineer. We want to take a look at the completions engineer, might be somebody that we're interested in. Completions oil field supervisor, and then just kind of construction supervisor. So these might be all different people that are of interest to us as far as looking at the customers that we're focused on. So we end up building that list of contacts that we have. The other thing that we look at when we're doing this is when we go to the individual's profile, we can then use the LinkedIn scenario to find this particular individual. And when we look at his profile, then we're coming in and we're saying, okay, one nice thing, a lot of times we see description here, and then that gives us the ability to look at this and say, okay, Here's more detail about their roles and responsibilities. So again, we segment the market. So we say, what area are we wanting to focus on? We look at the accounts that fall into that area, and then specifically we look at all the variables associated with that accounts. What contacts can we get? What roles do they play that we want to be able to reach out and have a contextual reason of why we want to be able to deal with them. And we look at other variables around that account, private, public, have they raised money, what's their financial position. So that allows us to make the determination of which one of these accounts show up on our list that we're focused on. I also did it, we worked through it. So we might say Westbrook is another company that we're interested in. And then when we look at Westbrook Energy, which I see here, we can come in and we can say, okay, well, here is the compressor information. When we look at the compressor information, we might say to ourselves, well, is that enough activity for us to put them on our target list? So we might say, okay, well, we've got that infrastructure. How much drilling have they done and how frequently has it been? And then ultimately, if we see an increase in the drilling activity, we can say to ourselves, okay, we know they're going to add more facilities associated with it. And then we walk through the same process. We come in and we say, well, who are our primary contacts that we're going to focus on? We come in, we look at that contacts list, we make our list, we evaluate them, see if we can determine what role they play in a decision-making process. And then when we go to reach out and start our engagement, we've got some contextual background. We know where they're drilling. We know what type of facilities they have. We know what kind of areas that they're operating in. And then we can use that information to help ourselves when we're building that relationship with the customer. The idea, we just walk through the process, pick a couple key areas, pick a half a dozen accounts in each one of those areas, go through that process of identifying the key contacts, building the model and the messaging around that, and then have you starting to engage those individuals from a relationship perspective.